welcome. We're excited that you could join us online and in person for our conversation on a pleasure-centered approach to trans sexualities. I'm Pele Shalev, the events manager for the Office of Events at the California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university. We're here today in San Francisco on the unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, which they call Yelamu. In the Ramaytush Ohlone language, Yelamu identifies both the people and the territory. As a representative of CIIS, I want to start off by expressing our debt and gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original peoples and continual caretakers of the San Francisco Peninsula. This acknowledgement is only a single, small step towards being in deeper connection and relationship with Indigenous tribes and organizations in our community. If you're joining us online, I invite you to call out in the chat where you're calling from. To learn more, we recommend the website native-land.ca as a starting resource. It is so lovely to see those of you who are gathered here in this room and to share a space with all of those who are joining us online and watching this conversation from all over the world. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few troubleshooting items. We will have a live Q&A after the conversation tonight. Since this is a hybrid event, we have a hybrid Q&A process so that both our online and in-person guests have the same chance to participate. Those of you who are here in the room, you will find the QR codes linking to the Q&A form in the sheets, in your seat. Online, you'll find that same link in the event description below this video. We'll gather questions from our presenters from that form, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. For those of you who are online, chat will be enabled during this event, but please note that it is not being moderated, and our presenters cannot see the chat. If you choose to participate in chat, please be respectful and avoid language that could be offensive or insensitive to others. You can turn the chat off at any time, and we encourage you to do so if you find it negatively impacts your experience in any way. Now, let me introduce our presenters, Dr. Lucie Fielding and Dr. Roger Kuhn, and then we'll get right to the conversation. Dr. Roger Kuhn is a Porch Creek Two-Spirit, indigiqueer somacultural sex therapist, sexuality educator, writer, activist, and musician. Roger's work explores the concepts of decolonizing and unsettling sexuality and focuses on the way culture impacts and informs our bodily experiences. He is a community organizer of the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit Powwow and a board member of the Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ+ Center for Equity. His first book, Somacultural Liberation, is available in both paperback and audio, and his music can be streamed on all digital platforms. Lucie is a white, queer, trans, misogyny-affected femme and a therapist licensed in Virginia and Washington State. She lives and works on Monacan land, and they received their master's in counseling psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And she also holds a PhD in French from Northwestern University, where she specialized in histories of sexualities and erotic literature. Their background in literature and history attunes them to the many ways that image, metaphor, and cultural scripts shape and inform the narratives we carry with us as we move through the world, as well as how these narratives inscribe themselves on our bodies. In addition to their work as a therapist, Lucie is a sex and kink educator, as well as the author of Trans Sex, Nurturing Trans Erotic Embodiment and Gender Pleasure. The first edition of Trans Sex was shortlisted for a Lambda Literary Award and was awarded the 2022 ASEC Book Award, the 2024 Star Health Professionals Book Award, and the 2024 APA Division 44 Distinguished Book Award. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Fielding and Dr. Raj.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Afternoon, wherever you may be listening today. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you all. Lucie, what a joy and an honor and a pleasure, a real pleasure to be with you tonight.
I am so tickled that I get to be IRL conversation with you. Like, this is a great pleasure.
Yes, Lucy and I have spent lots of time over the years online together. So this is nice to do this in real life. IRL is in real life for those who may not know the acronym IRL. And that's maybe actually a good place to get started. Is for those of you that are new to Lucy's work, who may be new to this concept of even pleasure, I want to start there by even just breaking down some terminology for our audience and for our listeners tonight. And maybe pleasure is a good place to start so that we can be working together on an operational definition. So when Lucy and I say certain terminologies, you will know what we mean with those terms. So let's start with pleasure. How are you defining pleasure these days?
Pleasure is enjoyment, is liking. And I define it that way because I think too often we conflate pleasure with sex. And another word that I imagine that we'll talk about is the erotic. And I want to really make space for I want to center any kind of discussion on there are many ways to experience embodiment, to connect with the erotic, to connect with pleasure, to connect with joy in one's body. And sex is one of those great ways. And there are so many other ways as well. Like another definition, sex is an energy. It's not, to my mind, a set of techniques. It's not a set of genitals behaving in particular ways or even being involved. It's an energy that just gets applied. It's sex if you say it's sex, and if you agree that it's sex. And so, and I think sex and the erotic they're an unruly, ungovernable force.
Well, there's something about being in the field of sexuality. Lucy and I are in the field of sexuality. And so for those of us that study sex, sexuality, gender, there is an enjoyment that comes with that, right? There is this way in which even just our academic studies and our therapeutic work is not only centering pleasure, it derives pleasure for us, like if you ever hang out with sexologists, we say we geek out on sex, but we don't necessarily mean when people think of that term, right? We're thinking about the ways in which the pleasure is expansive in all of these ways. And I like to think about the erotic and how when my intro to erotic was, yes, Madonna's erotica album. I will name that.
Same.
That was for me. That was people always say, how did you get to be the way you are? It's like I grew up in Madonna's era of erotica. I mean, come on, that's it. Though it really shifted what I thought the erotic was, right? And then learning about it, actually studying it more, made me understand that it was, yes, sex, and it was so much more. It was almost spiritual in this way. So I would love to hear your perspective on how you might even define the erotic.
There are so many sources for me of that. I think first and foremost of Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic.
Phenomenal if you've not read it yet.
It's a wonderful, wonderful text. She gets a little she definitely gets sex work negative and a little kink negative and kink shamey, but at certain times. But at the same time, what I love is the way that she expands the notion of the erotic while not taking away its ferocity, and and its potential as a force. I also think about, there's a book that came out in 2022 called Hatred of Sex. And I think about the ways that they talk about how, like, we use the word erotic when we want to speak politely and use like a genteel tone when because, you know, sex is too, you know, scary. And I really want to take that critique, and that when I say the erotic, I'm not talking about something genteel. I'm talking about something unruly and destabilizing and unsettling, both unsettling as a word and as a compound of un and settling, separated by
And the
hyphen.
pleasure that can come from that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're breaking out of the familiar, breaking out of one's comfort zone. And, you know, that's where change and all the juiciness happens, I think. So I always think about that and I love Freud. I'll come out and say it. I love Freud.
I'm a Freud, I do not.
Yeah, you know, but I like the way that, I don't like drive theory, but I do like the way that he is not afraid to see the erotic as destructive, and destructive in a very amoral way, you know, of like it both, it can be destructive in a very, very good way, and it can be annihilating. But yeah.
It makes me think of how, when I think of your work, from that perspective of when we approach something we do not understand. I imagine if your book is in the bookstore and people walk past it and they go, what, you know, the title is a double take for a lot of folks. And there's an untethering when I read your book of what it was that I thought I knew about my own experience with my body, with other bodies, and also from a clinical perspective, like what I thought about my clients' bodies and their perspectives. So there's a way that I think that the erotic in that way, the way you've described it, fits so well with your work, because there's this permission that the reader has when they're reading your work to be destructive in their own identity, in their own body, and that unsettling process of what it means to take what you were taught and let that go, to trust that process of letting it go.
And that's precisely why sex, sexuality, and gender are always at the center of a moral panic, you know, because they are destabilizing, they are unsettling, they are, or they have the potential to be. They can also be conservative at times, but they have this potential to really upend the status quo and have us questioning the status quo, you know, question everything that, you know, like Gen X meme, you know, so.
Now, what's interesting that folks may not know about the sexuality field, in particular as clinicians, is that touch is actually something that causes moral panic.
Yes.
Because, you know, we don't touch our clients in clinical realms. And I always say that, you know, folks don't come to me as a sex therapist because their sex life is great. They're coming because they're grieving something Sex therapy is grief work, just for folks to really understand that. We're grief therapists. And touch sometimes is needed as a form of comfort, as a form of human understanding, connection. And I bring this all up because Lucy and I actually met at a conference many moons ago, and we were at a touch-based, it was like a somatic-based pre-conference workshop, and it was all about touch. And the very first time we had to choose partners, Lucy and I were partnered together. And so our first introduction to one another was through the body. And we had to get over that. Well, I certainly didn't feel moral panic at the moment myself, but just that idea that we were doing something in our field that was so rebellious, that was so destructive, that we were willing to be with this idea of just touching one another from a very basic human perspective. And I remember it was all consent-based and all like, can I hold your hand and can I massage your forearm? And I just remember that so much. And I think one of the reasons why I feel so connected to Lucie is because our first introduction wasn't just chatting, it was actually connecting and touching in that particular way. And we also came up in the sort of world, the sort of sex therapy world, sex education world, around the same time as when we sort of both kind of were emerging in the field. And look at us now, doctors with books and all the things at CIIS. So
Sledgehammering doors down.
that is what you've done. You've walked through some doors that may have been propped open, and you sledgehammered them, and you made it easier than, just easier for folks to come in. And I want to just name that.
And I take that from you.
Oh,
In this, and in particular, that sledgehammering metaphor, because it's something so dear to me. It's the idea that, like, yes, I have a platform to speak, and I want to speak now, and but I do so because ultimately I want to start a conversation, but I know that, like, I'm not going to be the one to end it, or at least I hope I'm not, and I think and I write iteratively, and I feel iteratively, and everything is provisional for me. There's a line from a short story by Anam Sufi, Undone, from Undone, and it's, hold me like you would a photograph from the edges and lightly. And I love the idea of holding concepts, holding beliefs, holding language that way. And concepts, and so everything is like, it's a draft. And it's always about how many more people can I hold the door open for, or can I sledgehammer a door open for, so that they can continue on the conversation, because I'm going to miss things because of my social location, because so many things. And I always want to make sure that, like, there are problems with my work, and I'm well aware that they are. I don't know exactly all of them, but and I can try to fix them, but ultimately it's going to be somebody coming after me who is it's like, you did a good job starting it, but, like, let me take it from here. And is going to do something brilliant that I couldn't even imagine, couldn't even dream of. And so that's what the door gets sledgehammered for.
Lucy and I, the other day, had a chat before tonight. And I asked Lucy, how you doing? how are you doing? Because I think Lucie's work is visible. There's a visibility that you're having. And part of your social location, as you mentioned, is this visibility. And so as a friend, I said, I'm a little worried. How are you? What's it like for you to be visible, to do this work in the way that you do this work now? And I asked permission first if I could bring that up tonight, if Lucie was okay and comfortable talking about that. So that was just my little intro to say, like, about to ask Lucie a question, which is, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling in terms of what we are figuring out how to survive through right now?
I think sometimes one of the joys of like being in conversation with other queer and trans folks is you know, we can ask that question and you know, we both know that it's fucking grim, that it really sucks, and we can agree, yes, it's awful and it's terrifying, and also like there are also these moments of connection and gloriousness that you know that we can also talk about. I'm terrified. I don't know what to, sometimes I wake up and I don't know what to do or to say to meet this moment. I don't know how to be in my body sometimes at a given moment. And yeah, I'm terrified. I mean, I've had run-ins with, you know, some of, you know, the figures on the right, you know, who have called me things and have, you know, and I've gotten death threats and it's scary. I would say that like I live in a rural part of the U.S. And I say sometimes, you know, that there's a choice. You can play respectability politics or oppositional politics, and both are exhausting.
Yes.
But I'd much rather go for the oppositional because the respectability politics just like melon balls my soul. So, you know, but it's like, it's hard to hold that. And, you know, I think there's a tension, and I love tension. I love tension. Where on the one hand, we have to pay attention. We have to be very clear about, you know, that like the rhetoric that is being deployed against folks is, you know, like I don't take it as joking. I don't, you know, every time I show up someplace and, you know, I see that they've, you know, posted the address, I'm like, oh God, you know, like, of course you have to. And also like, you know, I'm thinking about my security. I'm thinking about, you know, who's in a room. And at the same time, like, I don't think we can be like Clockwork Orange, you know, and that scene, you know, just holding open with those, you know, so that we're just like staring at it all the time. And so how do you hold that tension of being very clear-eyed about what's going on while also recognizing that we, just like rest is important, and I think about like the NAP ministry Emily and Amelia Nagoski's Burnout. Just as rest is important, I think pleasure is important. Because I don't just want our survival, I want our thriving.
Yeah.
I want to dream futures. The great queer theorist Jose Esteban Munoz writes in, Cruising Utopia, that the here and now is a prison house. And he talks about straight time versus queer time. And queer time is like all about this interplay between queer lineage and queer futurity. That queerness is not yet here. It's always over the horizon. And I think I really want to remember that, be grounded in my lineages, be grounded in the fact that that in certain respects, like we've been here before, there are technologies that have allowed us to move through those moments. I think it's, in some ways a whole heck of a lot worse. And, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so, it's like I saw some shit.
Probably started some too.
I tried. Mostly when I was, goth kid in the mid 90s. All of that is there, and so is there this imperative for us to dream. And that's what I really want to hold close is the dreaming. I want to dream futures that have all of you in them. In my future, the futures that I dream, you were all there.
I'm wondering that there may be folks here in the room with us tonight and that are listening in who are curious about should. In a moment like this, I should say something. In a moment like this, I should speak up. I should, and yet I don't know what to say. I'm frightened to say something.
Quit shoulding yourself.
Right, quit shitting all over yourself, right? So I'm just curious if you would be willing to maybe speak to, if you ever have that part of you that says that maybe you could be doing more, you could be using your platform in a different way, and if so, just to how to normalize that voice for folks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many, I think especially on social media, there can be this almost like, there's this, again, tension where, it's like, don't doom scroll, but please doom scroll. And you're never doing enough. But, of course, enoughness is part of a discourse of capitalism. Too much, too little, not enough. So yeah, I think I'm Jewish, and one of the principles, kind of the highest principle of tzedakah is the idea that like you do things from, and you don't expect to be noticed. And you do it namelessly, you do it, and you do it without a desire to be thanked or to be recognized for it. And so I think a lot of us do things, a lot of things that aren't that are happening behind the scenes, and I don't want to question that. You know, it's like, God, you don't want me out there punching Nazis. I have a bad punch unless I'm like impact topping, in which case I have a great punch. But like, you don't want me out there. You want me sitting with you after you've punched a Nazi.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, so you know, I'm terrible at call and response. Terrible, absolutely terrible. I am great at contributing to mutual aid.
Yeah.
I am great at. I'm great at educating. I'm great at engaging folks in conversation. And I think like our activism is going to look different, you know, and there's so many roles to play. And so I say, quit shitting yourself. Stay involved, be engaged, and also rest. Take time for pleasure, because the worst thing is like, I mean, what, you know, flooding the zone means we want you as exhausted and worn out and depleted and restless as possible, because then we get to do whatever we want, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. When we take moments to rest, to be in community, to be in pleasure, that gives us something to fight for. Something that gives us our future. You know, it's like, I won't rest until X is accomplished. No, please rest. By all means fight, but also please rest. Please take care of yourself. I want you here in a year and not burned out.
Yeah. This idea that I'm taking from this is really knowing, learning, understanding, trusting your strength of what it is that you may be able to contribute in some kind of way. And then also that it's not a competition. The competition feeds that flooding narrative that they want us so badly to participate in, right? To, if I enoughness myself, I'm not enough of this. I think for those of us that are on this circular identity around our sexuality, there is this curiosity of enoughness. Am I two-spirit enough? Am I queer enough? Am I a PhD enough? Right? All of these things where we get constantly trapped in that comparative model, which steals our pleasure. It steals our joy.
And keeps us from actually being engaged.
That's right. Yeah.
Because we're looking around comparing instead of being in the moment and being in relation, being in movement.
It's a disembodiment tactic, comparison.
Yeah.
It disembodies us. And this work that we do is all about the body. Right? It's about this connection with the body, understanding my body in relation to other bodies through whether it's tension or whether it's through joy and pleasure or impact in all of these ways. I do want to speak to, a moment ago, you talked about this idea of seeing everybody a year from now thriving. And I'm thinking of Wisner's work, Gerald Wisner's work around survivance, which is this concept of survival and resistance. And so there's a concept that further is about thrivance, thriving while resisting. So just to kind of offer that this work is thrivance. It is survivance, it is thrivance, it is future-oriented, it is queer in the way in which we do not know what may be coming. The beauty of that is that we can prepare for anything. We can prepare for the joy, right? Because that may also be just over the horizon. And if we stay more connected and in touch with our bodies, it's much easier to access in those particular ways.
While also giving ourselves permission to just not be in our bodies sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, that like some days you wake up and you're like, oh God, I just need to sit here and in a fetal position and cry.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your book.
Okay.
Second edition. Yes, second edition. What's different about it?
Well, one of my editors, when they commissioned a second edition, said, well, you know, the second edition, generally we recommend that like no more than 30% of the book is new. And it's like, okay, just a query. What if it were more like 80%? Overachiever, masochist, whatever, you know. And so like, as I said, I think and write very iteratively. And so there are a couple of chapters that are, you know, for all intents and purposes, similar, very, very similar to chapters that exist in the first edition. And then, you know, there were ones that I was like, you know, I need to refocus. God, my nesting partner is such a wise person because she calls me out a lot of the time, and one of the inconvenient things that she has reminded me of is that every time I'm unsure of something or I'm unsure of myself, I cite to the ends of the earth, and I like I like there put up all this theoretical armature. And so like the second edition is partly me saying, no, I'm standing on my own concepts. I don't need this person to for my claims to make sense. And I'm going to stand in that. I would say too, there's these moments where I think in the first edition, I didn't know what I had. I didn't know whether people were going to hate it, you know, like burn me in effigy in the town square, you know. And it turns out that, you know, like, yeah, a lot of clinicians read it. You know, it says clinical approaches in the subtitle of the first edition. But I also had a lot of community members read it. And I had a lot of people that I really intended to read it, but you know, like, for example, like in gender affirming care, we have this concept, the multidisciplinary team. And usually like when we talk about that, what they really mean is like medical providers and mental health providers. Meanwhile, I'm like, the people that I've done the best work with and that I most love being in community with are professional dominants, are surrogate therapists, are surrogate partner therapists, are somatic sex educators and sexological body workers. And I mean, we met at one of those occasions. So I think it's just so important for me. Like the we in the first edition was like referring to me as a clinician. The we in the second edition is when I'm talking about community. And clinicians get, and other providers get the, don't get the we.
Lucie is one of those folks that has thought about my concept of what I name as decolonizing and unsettling sexuality, and I believe taking it to heart. Because another plug that I'll make for the book is that I have a little section in it. And I remember the morning that I got that email with an invitation from Lucie to say, will you be a contributor to the second edition? And I felt incredibly flattered by that, one, because I deeply respect your work. And I thought, because this book is going to have a wide audience, it's an opportunity for an Indigenous presence to be a part of it, to have that two-spirit indigiqueer perspective be a part of this book. And I wrote about two-spirit erotic embodiment. And what you just said a moment ago about sort of taking this idea that you don't necessarily need all these citations anymore, because you are the citation. And it's a reminder to everybody listening that once upon a time, somebody else made up everything we've ever read before, right? Every theory was made up.
And usually by white,
Usually
cis.
by white, cis, straight men.
Yeah.
And so that means that we can do that too. And that we can build the foundations of knowledge from our own community. If folks outside of the community read it, understand it, embrace it, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Though the work that we do is by and for our community, for their survivance and for their thrivance. And so I just wanted to also name that you have every single right to do exactly what you did. And if your publisher was like, no, we're only interested in keeping it 30%, you can also pass.
Yeah.
And so you used your social location and privilege to say, what I want to add to this is not only relevant, it's necessary. So I just want to give a plug for that, to say that it's pretty badass in the world of publishing what you did, right? Like, it's pretty badass to say, like, what about 80%? That's a rarity. So bravo on that. And when's the book out? Where folks find it?
It's October 23rd is the drop date. So coming up 2 weeks from today.
Yes.
So I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited for it to be out in the world and on people's bedside tables and bookshelves. Maybe I prefer it being on somebody's bedside table than their bookshelf. But it's really exciting to me because I really just hope that more people feel seen by it, and I really tried to make this edition, I kind of nickname it the Dreaming Trans Futures edition. And it starts out with a preface called Dreaming Trans Futures and an Anti-Trans Present. And that was really important to me to have in there, to acknowledge that, things are fucking grim.
Yeah.
And also, there is a place for pleasure in that. And so often we keep hearing oh, pleasure is liberatory. Sure, if there's a praxis behind it.
That's right. Yeah.
And if it's not just self-care, bubble bath. I love a bubble bath.
Same.
Love a bubble bath. Not gonna knock them, but that's not a praxis. It's about that fitting in, so that it is actually about breaking the world, but in this really gorgeous, generative way that is scary, but also holds such possibility, because I just want to live my life. I want you to live your life. I want, I don't bear anyone, any ill will. I might disagree vehemently or with someone, but like I don't wish them ill. But and I just want us to be thriving out there. It's like I wish it weren't the case that that the personal is political.
Right.
I say sometimes, I'm not bringing the politics to my body. Politics is bringing the politics to my body. And I am going to respond when you do that. But I'm going to respond, and I'm, yeah.
This idea of the praxis of pleasure and liberatory ideology as the foundation of that, and what you said a moment ago is like, really not wishing harm on others, because liberation requires that we don't.
Yeah.
One of the most challenging things I think about a moment like this is these feelings that emerge of disgust or anger, all masks for the deep sadness. What do I do with those feelings when I want you to be free? When I want someone who wants to harm us, whether it's politically or physically, I just wish for them to be free, because that is all that we want as well, to be free in our bodies, to be free in our communities, to be free so that a year from now we can get back together and have a conversation like, what'd you think of the book after you read it, right? There's this way to hold this idea that liberation in and of itself is dangerous. Not just the act of advocating and activism, to literally free oneself, to be in your truth about, this is who I am. This is the kind of sex I want to have. This is the kind of body I want to live in. These are the kind of people I want to spend my time with. To be able to be honest with ourselves about those things can be incredibly dangerous, because we may have not had a book like yours to serve as the foundation for our liberation. Please give us the new title, because you said the first one was a clinical approach, but now it's transsex.
Nurturing trans erotic embodiment and gender pleasure. And I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about what gender pleasure is, but it's basically a way of talking that what some call trans joy, what some call gender euphoria, but but to me, like, gender euphoria sounds too clinical and also too rarefied. And so, like, gender pleasure is it's the pleasure in and with gender or agender. And it is, about finding things that are relevant to your gender, ways of, feeling affirmed in that way, that like your body is being approached by someone from from these energies and intentions that are really just so yummy, and I love the way that you're touching me, or that you want to touch me. And just like feeling, and to take away from the rarefied bit, it's also just feeling, it's a grab bag of feeling yummy in your body at a given point. It doesn't require the kind of like body positivity if I've got to love my body all the time. Maybe sometimes you feel yummy in it, though. Maybe you listen to Prince's Erotic City, and and you like the way that your hips are moving.
Yes, yeah.
and that's your gender, or that's your agender, So that's what that is. Just
And being in that pleasure is healing.
yeah.
Pleasure heals in that way. This may come as some surprise to all of you, though, that those of us in the sexuality field don't always go around the world thinking about sex and sexuality and gender and pleasure and bodies. We think about other things too. And so I wanted just to ask you, Lucie, in those moments when you're not working, in those moments when you're not on, what brings you pleasure?
Cooking. I love cooking. I love feeding people. I love being a domestic goddess sometimes. If you're really lucky, I'll cook for you in like fancy lingerie and heels,
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I'll
that's
roll
the thing.
those dice.
I my leather communities and kink is very important to me, and being a leather dyke is not just like about wearing leather, although I do love to wear it, but it's
Is it
about
always black?
nearly always. I do have some purple in there and some blue. But yeah, no, it's about a politics, and it's about an engagement and a connection to lineage. So being in community really, really means a lot to me. Like quality moments with my dear ones brings me so much joy and pleasure. Like I'm not a big, large group person. I kind of become a wallflower and shrink in large groups, and I'm painfully shy sometimes. But God, if I can have like quality time with like 2 or 3 friends, 2 or 3, or just like a date with a lover, like, damn, sign me up for that. Like, I love that. That gives me so much joy. It makes, that's how, I keep going, because I just want to feel that hug again.
Yeah. For the listening audience, what you may not be aware of is that Lucie is looking fabulous in a head-to-toe leather outfit. And as I was getting ready to come into the city today, I thought, Lucie's going to be wearing leather, therefore I shall also wear leather. So I went into my
Dyke-alike.
closet and I picked specifically because I was thinking, I'm going to dress like Lucie. And I did not quite know we would look quite the same because there's a lot of things that, I've got this lovely snake ring on. Lucie has a fab snake belt on. We both have textured shoes on. So there's just, there's a lot of symbiosis happening on this stage tonight. And I'm feeling a lot of pleasure when I saw you come in. I was like, ooh, okay, I picked the right outfit for tonight. We just have a few moments left together in this conversation. And CIIS has been a place that many people come because it evokes the inquiry of spirit, however you define that. And CIIS, for me, as someone that has been a student here, also faculty, it's been a place where I have been able to be with what is spirit for me. And that's where I want to end our conversation together tonight, is around how in this world that we are in, that we are not just surviving, but this world that we are thriving in, as examples of folks who can thrive in this chaos that we're in. How does spirit visit you? And if there's a way that spirit would guide you over the next year or through the release of this book, what might that be?
I think it shows up in so many ways. It shows up in my love of story and myth and metaphor and image. And how, like, I consider myself a humanist and not a social scientist. I really hate it when, like, therapists behave like social scientists, or like try to justify our work based on social science. I also I have a practice of ritual, and that is very, very important to me. My diasporic Judaism is very important to me. And like my witchery is very connected to those lineages. Like I was doing a tarot pull for the full moon, the Aries full moon the other night, which I tend to do. I tend to do like a bath and then, a tarot card pull. And I pulled 5 cards, and it was a gorgeous reading. And I was about to put the deck away. And I was like, in Judaism, we have a 6-pointed star, not a 5-pointed star. And so I'm going to pull a 6th card. And boy, that was that I've been like haunted by that 6th card. It was the 9 of Swords, for those of you who know your tarot decks. And it was this like, it was like that time where I pulled the Tower on a, and I was like, at first I was like, oh God, this doesn't feel great. And then, it's like, oh yeah, pain, great. But then I thought about like, it's also about the stuff that I really love, which is like really accepting the pain and also what is beyond it. And what is beyond it are the emotionally transformative experiences. And that's really what I'm looking for, is the emotionally transformative experience.
Well, thank you for this emotionally transformative experience tonight. We're going to transition to some questions. Though before we do so, Lucie, I just want to take one more moment to truly say thank you, first and foremost, on a personal level. I've adored getting to be your colleague in the beginning, and then now to call you a friend is even more important. And I also want to thank you for your visibility and your willingness to remain risen in this moment. And just know that I and so many others are along your side. If you need us, please feel free. You know how to find me. And thank you to CIIS and the community for welcoming Dr. Lucie Fielding tonight on this incredibly important, informative, pleasure-centered work that is all about how we all can learn to be better together in sex and in community and in embodiment and pleasure. Dr. Lucie Fielding, thank you so much. Mado, Mado, Mado. Thank you. So we're going to take some questions from the audience. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We just got some lovely flowers. Mum's the word on who they're from. These aren't mums, are they? No, they're dahlias. I tried. I'm punny, y'all. I am punny, and sometimes they don't work out. Lucie, can you talk more about what it means to have pleasure with a praxis behind it?
Yeah, it's about, I'm always thinking about the relational. And so like one of the concepts, and I'm certainly not alone in this moment of talking about solidarity. But one of the concepts that's really key to the second edition is a kind of like solidarity, yes, in the provider-client relationship, but an erotic form of solidarity. My dear friend, Empress Wu, incredible performance artist and one of the most creative minds I know, and a fabulous dominatrix. And they have a expression, mutual entanglement. And I really think about that, you know, the ways that, and I'll be a language nerd for a second, but like what I love about that is that entanglement implies both like being tangled up in someone with something, like a mycelial network or, you know, but it also refers to tangling with. So at the heart of the solidarity relationship is always going to be tension and even conflict. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. That's when things are generative. And so I think that praxis comes from that commitment to mutually entangle, to make it part of like the pleasure is part of a larger part of being in movement. The poet Miller Oberman has this great poem called On Trans, and I quote from it extensively, thanks to Miller and Princeton University Press for allowing that. And the first stanza of that poem is talking about trans as like movement and about, you know, seeing across, being across, and being in movement. And I think about the erotic and pleasure as, you know, constantly in process, constantly in action, not quite always there and not quite always departed, just in movement.
This next question is around trans youth. What advice do you have for how families and communities can continue to support transgender youth if access to gender-affirming care and medical support becomes restricted and or unavailable? And what are other ways to nurture safety, belonging, and self-love for these children?
Well, first of all, I should say I work almost exclusively with adults, and so I kind of sometimes feel very out of my depth when it comes to speaking to, you know, to trans youth. However, and trans families, there is so much pain and fear that families are sitting with, and you know, at the very dead center of the moral panic. There's a T-shirt by, I think, Zach Ozma, you know, who says, you know, the moral panic is about me. You know, and I think I just like to trust that kids know what know about their own bodies. And that, I mean, it's something that we really want for them. You know, when we talk about consent, you know, we want to talk about, you know, the fact that like a child should be able to decide if, you know, like, if they receive a hug, for example, from someone, you know, they should be able to say no to
Yes.
that. And I think about that with respect to, you know, embodiment and experimentation with gender, and I think and exploration and feeling into one's body, and I think, you know, so often we're so afraid, especially in the medical establishment, of regret.
Mm.
You know, and I on the other hand, think often about dear friend Doug Braun Harvey, who says, you know, like ambivalence is essential to the change process.
Yeah.
I think ambivalence is good. I think uncertainty is good. I think recognizing grief and loss is good. The gains too, but it's like I think about some of my clients, you know, who have had top surgery, and you know, and some of them will like come in and they'll say like, this is one of the best things that I've done. I'm so glad I got top surgery. And also like, sometimes I just wish I could stick them on, you know, and just like that they could be modular, you know, but like, I don't want to say that too loudly because like, what if somebody interprets that as regret?
Sure.
And it's not, you know, it's just simply like, it's recognizing that there's difference and change
Yeah.
and variability. I feel like I'm not being very responsive to the question, and I apologize for that.
I have a slight offering around the second part around like what are ways to nurture, and I'm thinking about this is not just a Bay specific thing, though. I belong to an organization called the Bay Area American Indian Two Spirits, and every year we have a fantastic Two Spirit powwow. It's the largest Two Spirit powwow in the country, and it is open and accessible to everyone, whether you identify as Indigenous or not. And it's the reminder there that before we had colonization, we had what we now say Two-Spirit folk. And Two-Spirit folk are not necessarily trans, though we definitely are gender expansive. And some of us identify as trans, and some of us identify as non-binary. We're all kinds of things within that beautiful circular spectrum. So the invitation for folks is culture. That there are cultures all around the world that celebrate gender expansiveness all over the world. Though if you live in the United States, or you live in Canada, or you live in Mexico or Central America, you can find Indigenous cultures that celebrated gender expansiveness long before colonization, and to teach young children that your body is actually, a body like yours is actually what is Indigenous to these lands, not the ignorance, not the hatred, not the phobia. We celebrate that. And so like come to the powwow, see how we've been doing it, see how we've reclaimed space for gender expansiveness within our communities, and to dance and to drum and to sing. And again, children are there, and you'll see young Two-Spirit children dancing at our powwows. So please come to the powwow or go to a powwow nearby. There are so many that happen across the US and Canada now, Two-Spirit powwows. And that's just a place is like find your community, find culture as a way to help these young kids know they are not alone. And there are adults like Lucie and myself who are looking out for them and creating spaces for them to be seen and heard, celebrated, and most importantly, loved. We have a few more questions.
Love that response. It's just pitch perfect chef's kiss.
What does authentic representation of erotic diversity look like to you with the unruly you've described in mind? And are there examples in popular culture that you think could get it right? Authentic, you kind of have to unpack that word too, like authentic to whom, like, right? Like,
Well, and get it right
yeah,
is
right,
also,
exactly. Yeah,
like,
because that's
if it's right for you, it's right,
that's right. That's,
Um,
yeah.
I think, I look out in the world and I see so much inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many people reaching for a future
Yeah.
in some really just like gorgeous ways, and they don't have, and a lot of them are not, big names, folks who appear on the cover of Time magazine. They are, they're just like quietly living their lives and being in community. And, I see so much of that in particular in leather dyke spaces, which, is so important to me is, because I see like, and there's a long history of this, it's like, I think of, Jacob Hale's Leather Dyke Boys and Their Daddies, from 1994, I think. Great article. Susan Stryker's magnificent dungeon intimacies, that, document again these spaces where like gender expansiveness and gender play. And that's the thing, it's like there's a, kink queer erotica writer, Zan West, who describes in one short story, gender is an elaborate sex toy. And, it's one of those phrases, like, these are the juicy ones, the ones that I really love. It's like when I encounter it and it's like, I don't know what the fuck that means, what that is, but like, I'm going to devote my entire rest of my life to just like continually iterating and trying to figure it out. And I love that. I mean, that's that kind of unruliness. Is like I am going to just to play. I think the importance of play and and that happens, as you put in that gorgeous answer to the last question. Happens when we connect with our lineages. I think about, like Douglas Crimp's essay from 1987, How to Be Promiscuous in an Epidemic. And I thought about that a lot in the first couple of years of the ongoing COVID pandemic. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question around this idea that sex therapy is a great deal of grief work. And the comment is, can we share a bit more about what types of interventions, even rituals beyond touch that are useful? And I always like to frame it from that grief perspective, because I think that first and foremost, you go through all the grieving stages when you're working in like sex and sex therapy, because there's a lot of bargaining that happens. There's a lot of denial, there's a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, right? And then you get to that point where there's the intervention of acceptance. And I think that's what I want to focus a little bit on, is this, the intervention of acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean it's over. It's this acknowledgement that I can say that something isn't what I had hoped it would be. Whether that's my body, something did go wrong. That's why they're in the room. That is why they're in the room, because something went wrong and they're grieving it. Thank you. So, the intervention then is the acknowledgement of that. And can we get to a point in the work where I can say to you, I don't have an answer for you. I may have some steps, some techniques that have helped some other people, and they may be helpful for you. And that may be about getting them in their body safely, consensually, getting them to feel into their pelvic floor, maybe for the first time ever in their life, helping them understand the bounds of consent, teaching them how to ask for how they want to touch and how they want to be touched by themselves and with others. And that final piece of the acceptance is that even though things may not be how we had hoped they would be, if we have choice and believe we do, we can transform our relationship to the experience that we came in hurting from. And I think that's the most powerful thing that I can offer folks when it comes to grief is choice. We can't change what happened or what is happening. All we can do is change how we respond to it. Because sex therapy is not about what someone does with their behavior. Or I think even like when someone comes in for gender affirming care, to me it's not about their identity. It's about how they feel about it. Therapy is about how you feel about it. That's all I can help you with. I can help you transform how you feel about these things. And that's the real intervention for me, is that it's about acceptance and the understanding of how much choice we actually have. And our final question tonight is, given everything that's going on in the world, what is something that is currently bringing you hope?
I'm pausing because, I'm just trying to it's such a juicy question. I love it. I think things that give me hope. When I see folks fighting, and when and fighting for a better world of abundance, and for one that is always already here. That's something there's a concept, it's a Yiddish word, Doigkeit, which means here-ness. And it's from 19th century Buddhist traditions. And what it is about is the idea that the world to come is always already here. And it is here in our bodies, it is here in our communities. There is no next year, it is already here. And we live for that here-ness and for that being with-ness. I think, seeing the very seeing creativity and innovation and, just seeing like, just constantly blown away every single time I get to be in conversation with, another dyke, another queer person, another leather dyke, another trans person, gender expansive person, and I just see like, oh, wait, I never thought about that. Wow. Like I'm always, it leaves me breathless, panting, breasts heaving, and just like so excited for like, like I talk about like the words we use for parts, for example. And I remember this one workshop, I think it was in LA, where someone gave me a new word and that I'd never heard of before. And I was like, wow, like grand,
They
like
made it up. You can
like-
make up words.
you can make up words and you can try new things and you can find new holes, and you can make new holes, and I ingenuity and creativity and just like the ferocity of that creativity is just like knocks me off my considerably high heels.
Well, Lucie Fielding, you give me hope.
Thank you.
Trans sex gives me hope. The people in this room tonight give me hope, and the folks listening to this conversation who came with a good heart give me hope. So thank you all for being with us tonight. Please give a round of applause to Dr. Lucie Fielding. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you again to CIIS for hosting us tonight. Okay. Thank
so
you
much.
Thank you.
My God,
Lucie.
I don't even know what to do with myself. I'm just so like overcome with like joy and appreciation. Thank you so much, and
You're so
thank you for
welcome.
being here.
Yeah, the recording stopped? Yeah, okay. Yeah, now we're done. Now they press the stop button and we can just chill and relax. And truly, thank y'all for being here. I know it means a lot to Lucie.